So this is a video that's similar to ones that I've drawing actually that is similar to ones I've done previously. And what this video is called is Dynamic Models of Reality. And what I have here is I just kind of did 7 basic principles, and I just kind of want to walk through them. Now, the original, in my opinion, or from my perspective, original dynamic model of reality is found in the Tao Te Ching. And that's the whole thing of the yin and yang. Now, this symbolism right here, although it basically describes this kind of principle in some kind of way, this may or may not be the best kind of symbolism for it. So that's just the starting point, that the Tao Te Ching has this basic dynamic model of reality, the yin and yang. It doesn't fully describe each of those principles, and I think that's where we need to do other things to really understand what those principles really mean. Now, the next principle in when you're looking at a dynamic model of reality, or dynamic models of reality, or dynamic modeling of reality, is clockwise and anti-clockwise spins, which is just, here you go, you got this spin, that spin. But that's a basic principle, and that's a more precise way to look at yin and yang. It's actually taking it further. It's actually saying not just that you have this pattern that's just spinning in circles and going nowhere, but you have forces that are spinning in these, clockwise and anti-clockwise spins. So it's a little more specific. But then as you go further in looking at a dynamic model of reality, or dynamic models of reality, you have spin and counterspin. So you have a spin, then you have a counterspin, a spin, counterspin again, counterspin, spin, counterspin, etc. That's a much more accurate kind of depiction of how reality really works. There's never this notion of a static, stationary point in that kind of system. Another way of kind of conceptualizing a dynamic model of reality is contractive and expansive forces. And in this case, expansive and contractive spin forces. So you have this contractive force, which is contracting to a point, and then you have an expansive force, which is expanding outward in all directions. Now, another way to look at dynamic models of reality is active and passive. Now, this is very similar to the yin-yang kind of starting point, which is, this notion of male and female and so on. But in this sense, it's much more specific. Active and passive would be force and substance. So what you would have here is you have a medium, and then you have all of this action within it. In other words, all of these spin forces within it that move this medium. So whatever the medium is, and then you have these active spin forces within it, moving and spinning and moving it in all these ways. Then you have this a fundamental principle for a dynamic model of reality is this equation that I formulated, which is kind of essentially an elaboration on Newton's equation, but actually formulating it correctly. So it's force equals spin divided by counterspin. And so or force equals spin force divided by counterspin force. So what you have here, this is a similar drawing as I've done in a previous video. You have your primary spin force here, and then you have these counterspin forces branching off in outward from the primary spin force. And they're actually dividing, dispersing, or absorbing that spin force. So force is equivalent to a spin force, this spin force being divided by all of these counter spin forces that are dividing, dispersing, or absorbing that spin force. And that's a more accurate depiction of reality from a dynamic model of reality, which would be based on the notion of spin physics, or which really needs to be developed into a very refined, precise spin force geometry that we can then do the whole range of spin force applications and make much better spin force technologies. So the value of dynamic models of reality is you start with the premise of spin forces and you end with the spin force technologies, which should be more optimal, efficient, maximal kind of technological systems. So that's it. Thanks.